guys, welcome back to my channel. I am so excited to have a very, very special guest here today. And this is video number 1 in a series that I'm trying to do. I recently found out that April has been dubbed Second Chances Month. So I am interviewing some people who did some time inside and they are successfully living their second chance. So Don, do you want to give us a little bit about yourself, introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your story?
Sure. My name is Don. I just was released exactly a week ago. No, a week and 2 days ago.
Okay.
And in California, where I was arrested for embezzlement. I'm serving a 6-year sentence. I had to do 2 years in jail. Actually, it's a 6-year prison sentence that but they allowed me to serve 2 years in the county jail. And then 4 years of mandatory supervision, which I'm serving here in Pennsylvania, thanks to the Interstate Compact. So I was arrested about just over a year ago here in Pennsylvania. I spent a month here in Pennsylvania jail and then was transported back to California and spent 11 months in the Marin County jail back there. So that's been my story for about the past year and a couple of weeks.
Well, congratulations. Welcome home. I'm sure the adjustment has been amazing and exciting and tough and a whole bunch of emotions all wrapped into one. And I know when we were talking last night, you had mentioned the depression and the emotions right prior to and as you went in. Do you want to go over that a little bit and explain what you went through?
Sure. When I knew that this was kind of all about to come to a head, I didn't want to face it. So actually the day after the Eagles won the Super Bowl, I got in my car and I was in California at the time and drove down to Mexico with the thought being that I wasn't going to come back. And Gina put forth a full court press and did everything she could to find me. And over that same period, I kind of decided that I needed to not make the decision for everybody else that I wasn't going to be forgiven and allow people to make that decision for themselves. That along with, 1,000 other reasons got me back in my car and headed back to San Francisco. And eventually drove me across the country to get over here into Pennsylvania. So I was scared. I was nervous. None of my loved ones knew what I had done or the bad decisions that I had made. So I had to come clean, which was very, very difficult. But, it had to be done. And that was part of coming back, was knowing that I had to deal with that as well.
Sure. Yeah. So what was that transition like when as far as transitioning into prison, all of the emotions that come with it, leaving your wife, leaving your family, because most of our members go through this. And I think I explained this to you as well, but 100% of the people that I've coached throughout all of these years, so it's thousands of people, have at some point in the very beginning have had their loved one try to push them away, try to break up with them. And I have my theories about why they do it, but I'd love to know from your perspective, if you went through that, how that transition was, what the emotions were surrounding that early time.
Oh my gosh. It was, I don't know if I can properly describe the emotions that I was going through at that time. I was a mess.
Yeah.
I was afraid. I was afraid of going to jail. I was afraid of losing everybody that I loved. I was afraid of losing Gina. I was afraid of losing my girls. I was afraid of what everybody was going to say because, I portrayed one image that did not coincide with the crime that I committed. And that was very difficult for me to deal with as well. But when I went in, it was my first time ever in jail. I was 50 years old, so I had a pretty good track record up until then. But at the same time, I had a very long time to make up stories in my own head about what the experience was going to be like. So I was really nervous. And when we got the pounding at the door, a month after I had been back to Pennsylvania, I knew it was the cops coming for me. It was just too aggressive a knock. And it was kind of a mess how they handled it. But so I just wanted to get that part of it over quickly. So I, came down and cooperated, got into the car as fast as I could. So my 10-year-old stepson wouldn't be impacted, or would be impacted as little as possible. Then when I was in a holding cell for about 30 hours, and then they transported me to the jail here in Pennsylvania, which is old, very cold. And when I got there, they were asking me a bunch of questions about, had I ever contemplated suicide and blah, blah, blah. And I said that I had, and they said, oh, okay, well, we're going to take you up to medical. And I was thinking in my head, oh, cool, medical, hospital bed, white linens and a TV, right? And that was not the case at all. Medical up there was a very nasty cell with very nasty people surrounding me. They asked me to strip my clothes. They gave me 2 blankets. One was to wear, and one was to keep myself warm. There were no sheets on the bed. There was nothing. All of my meals, I had to eat with my hands because there was no utensils. They wouldn't give me utensils because they didn't want me to hurt myself. There was no soap. There was, the person before me was angry with the CO, so they were throwing feces from the bed through the bars towards the CO bubble, they call it. It was nasty. And I spent 4 or 5 days there. I spent Easter Day there. And it was gross. So that was my first experience with jail. From there, I was put into a maximum security cell or area because my bail was the amount of my embezzlement. So it was a higher bail. Because of the high bail, they put me in maximum security. So I had never committed a crime, never gotten in a fight, never done anything violent my entire life, but they still felt that it was best for me to be in maximum security. So you can only imagine the emotions that I was going through, just trying to deal with the fear of not knowing what was next, or not knowing how to handle all of that, not knowing who I was being surrounded by, who, all turned out to be relatively decent guys. But then on top of that, losing control over everything in my life. I had no control. I couldn't call anybody. I couldn't reach out to anybody. So yeah, we definitely went through that point that you were talking about, where I started wanting to control something, and that was to control not wanting my loved one, not wanting Gina to have to go through this with me. So I definitely tried to push her away. That was one of a couple of times that I actually tried to do that. But right off the bat, for sure, I didn't want her to have to go through this with me. I didn't want her to have to suffer the embarrassment. I didn't want her to have to explain things to people. But, I think there was some selfish motivation there too, in that I wanted to be able to control something. And thankfully she wouldn't let me do that. So yeah, I think that's not, from what I understand with some of the other people that I spoke to, it's not atypical. I think most people do go through that, and most of them have decent intentions. I think they don't want the person that they love to have to suffer this whole experience with them. But it's also kind of the easy way out. It's also easy to just say, you know what, go. I don't want you to have to go through this with me. So, but thankfully, like I said, Gina persisted.
Yeah. And I mean, everything that I would say is, from the inside perspective, is either what I hear from my husband, or in theory from helping people for so long. And you're basically confirming everything that I've said for so long in helping these people. But a lot of times it's easier for them to take that to heart when it's coming from somebody who lived it, which makes sense because you were there, you did it, you felt those feelings. So thank you for that. And I don't know that probably majority of people who are watching this video know Gina through the Facebook page. So Gina is a beautiful person. She's tenacious. She was a soldier for you. So what advice would you give to women, especially who have loved ones on the inside that are being pushed away, that aren't as much of a soldier and don't want to or cannot put up with him saying, go away, you know, I need to do this on my own, etc. What advice would you have for somebody in that situation?
That's a tough one. I would say that odds are that they probably don't mean it. They probably love the person dearly, and they just don't know how to handle the situation properly. In addition to that, you have to understand that, you know, the days in a jail are tedious and difficult, and the people there want to get on, you know, every possible last nerve that you have. And I think I mentioned yesterday that it's you kind of wake up holding a pail of patience, and everybody's trying to knock the patience out of the pail throughout the day. And some days people are way more successful than others, and your patience may be gone by the time you have your first phone call with your loved one. And so what may have started as a best intentions kind of phone call boils into a push away, or I don't want to do this with you anymore, or something along that line. So I would say 99% of the time that those calls are being made, the person doesn't really want to push the person away. It's just that their patience has had it for that day, or they're just trying to control one last thing if possible.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. We love puppy kisses and visits from our pets on video. And for everybody watching, Don and I both keep referring to a conversation yesterday. We filmed this whole entire video. It was an awesome interview, just as awesome as this one. And about an hour in, my computer crashed and decided it wanted to restart, and it didn't save any of it. So Don and Gina both graciously agreed to come back and do this all over again today. So thank you so much. I'm going to try to hit on everything that we hit on yesterday because it was so good. And I apologize again that happened, and thank you so much for doing this again. But
no problem. And thank you. I wanted to mention that, you know, one of the biggest issues that we had right off the bat was I felt that I had an instant fraternity of people that I was able to discuss my frustrations with in the jail. And one of the frustrations for me was that Gina had nobody, you know, nobody that could truly understand what she was going through. None of her friends really could, you know, talk to her and really have compassion and understanding. So this group has really been a godsend. So thank you for doing what you're doing.
Oh my gosh, of course. It makes me so happy just to help at least one person go through this, but the amount of people that we've been able to help and sister through this has been nothing short of amazing. And it makes your success stories and you guys coming out so much better because it allows all of us to celebrate with you. Because one day, myself included, it'll be all of our turn and everyone will be celebrating with her. And I think it makes it easier for you guys to stay out, at least in my opinion. Yeah. So talk to me a little bit about what an average day was like for you on the inside. I know you said you went in when you were a little bit older than the average inmate. How did that make a difference in your day-to-day life?
I don't know that it did. I mean, I went in not trying to impress anybody. I mean, there's a lot of guys that are there and they definitely have like a jail persona. They want everybody to know all the different jails that they've been to. They want everybody to know, you know, how many riots they've been in, how many fights they've been in. That wasn't my intention. My intention was to go in and just kind of do my time and be done with it as quietly and easily as possible. That's really difficult though when you're, there's a definite us versus them attitude in jail. And the them is in my case was the sheriffs or the COs. And it's brought on by them more than it is by the inmates. You know, I always have been one to offer respect and expected to get it in return. And That's not the case in there. You know, there's a couple deputies that made it their mission just to make your life as miserable as possible. So most days, for whatever reason, they woke us up at about 4 o'clock in the morning to shave. I have no idea why they thought that that was an appropriate time to shave, but they would come by and open our ports at 4, put the razor there, and expect it back at about 4:05, 4:10, and slam the ports closed at 4:10, and then we were up again at about 6:30 for breakfast. Most of my time was spent in a pod called a re-entry pod. So there was a lot, what they said was a lot of programming there. It was all geared towards addiction now. So if you didn't have a problem with drugs or alcohol, there wasn't really much for you. There was no one-on-one counseling. There was no psychiatrist. As a matter of fact, the thought of saying you wanted to go to a psychiatrist or talk to somebody was, you didn't want to do that for fear of going into the medical pod again, where you were stripped down and given 2 blankets, and you know, so nobody, even if they had issues, nobody wanted to admit them. So it's just, you would go and sit through programmings. You know, I always tried to grab something from the conversation. And then at noon they would serve you lunch. It was always the same lunch: 2 bologna sandwiches, a piece of fruit, and a half a pint of milk. I did get on a vegetarian diet because I was vegan before we went in. So I got a lot of peanut butter and a lot of cheese sandwiches before I started working in the kitchen, where my food opportunities kind of, the inventory went up a little bit as far as what I could eat. And then dinner was almost always TBP, something with TBP, and, you know, just kind of nasty stuff. And then we were out, we had to go back in our cells. We were out from 7:30 to 10:30, and then back in our cells from there. So when I first got to the jail, I was in a pod where I was only allowed to be out 2 hours a day, and then 1 hour on Tuesdays. So on Tuesdays, I was locked down for 23 hours a day. They did have a small exercise yard, which I think we figured you had to walk 47 laps in order for it to be a mile. That's how small the yard was. And there were 60 guys trying to vie for space in a yard that was 1/47th of a mile in circumference. So it was uncomfortable. And, you know, when you have 60 personalities like that, you're bound to have some people that don't get along. So it's just, it's a difficult social dynamic, to say the least.
Yeah.
So, but then when I started in the kitchen, I got to work there, and that was, they got us up at 4:30. We started our day at 5, and then we worked until noon. So that shift was responsible for putting the breakfasts together and the lunches. And my job was to be the baker. So I had to bake all the good stuff for the cops that the inmates never saw.
Did you get to eat any of it?
I got every once in a while. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Every once in a while I got to taste a cookie or an eclair or something.
Okay. And just for reference, you guys, a normal track 4 times around is a mile. So now you could see how small that space actually was.
Yeah.
Wow.
Tiny.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. So you did some time in Pennsylvania, in county, right? And then you did some time in California state. And I've always heard that West Coast jails are extremely different, a lot more hostile, a lot more difficult to do time out on the West Coast. Can you talk to me about your experience between East and West Coast, and how you felt about that, and if that's actually true?
I didn't find it that way because I was in Marin County, which is a suburb of San Francisco, and it's kind of it's a very Caucasian, very white county. So there's not a lot of diversity. That being said, in the jail, we had, so Latinos are kind of they separate them into two groups. They call all of them paisas. But then there's the northerners and the southerners. And so they don't like to mix the two of those groups because that just causes problems. Because this jail was so chill, I guess, I only got to hear stories about how bad some of the other California jails are. So apparently in some of the other jails, when you're booked in, you're asked what car you belong to. So that means like what nationality you want to represent. So the first thing I thought was, it's some of the problems we have with prejudice and race in this country stem from the jail and prison systems, because there they enhance it. They feed it by not allowing to have any kind of racial diversity. So at some of these jails, if you're white and you have a friend who's African American, you're not allowed to have lunch with them. You're not allowed to sit with them. You're not allowed to play cards with them. You're not allowed to gamble with them. You're not allowed to do anything. And if you do, then there's going to be a problem between the two drivers of the car, or shot callers, they call them. And then that gets taken care of usually with violence. In the Marin County Jail, I think there were 3 fights the entire time I was there, which were all taken care of rather quickly. So it wasn't that big of a problem there. What was really interesting to me, though, was the people that came in, and instead of enjoying the relaxed nature and non-political environment that we had, they kind of wanted it. They felt that it was, I don't know, like a badge of honor to be in a jail that had more of a political atmosphere than the one that we had. So there were times when there were threats and, tensions got a little high between the races, but it was always taken care of in a manner that was nonviolent. So it wasn't that bad. But yeah, some of the places in California, from what I understand, are pretty nasty. I didn't experience any racial tension in Pennsylvania. Not to say that there isn't any. I didn't experience any of it. And maybe that's because I was so afraid when I was there that I was kind of, shivering in the back of my cell at that point in time. But it really wasn't an issue. Also in California, I think because I was 50 when I went there, you get treated differently when you reach certain ages. So I was an OG, so they, I wasn't expected to have any kind of political affiliation or anything like that. I didn't care who I talked to. I really didn't make a difference to me, and I don't think it would have if it was a highly political environment. I just was going to talk to who I wanted to talk to. And I kind of got away with it. I think, one of the advantages that I had too was when I got in there, I just didn't care. I didn't care to make friends. I didn't care what people thought of me. And oddly enough, that drew people towards me, which was kind of interesting.
I think that it's interesting, but it's kind of not just a jail lesson, but a lesson in human nature, where people respect you for being you and for not trying to waver and try to be somebody that you're not, to fit in with a group. And I think that really does attract people to you. And another thing I want to respond to is when you said that there were people that were coming in that actually wanted the place to be kind of segregated and run like a penitentiary, as far as what I'm aware of. And it's interesting because in my experience recently, it's also been wardens and staff that come in and try to do that. And I think that, again, from my experience, I've never been inside, but from the people I've coached and what I've heard and what my husband tells me, it's because the inmates kind of run the jail, and it operates a little bit more smoothly that way. Although there's more fighting and a little bit more violence, they don't have to do as much. I don't know if that's true or not, but that's what I was always told, what I kind of gathered.
In the prisons? Yeah, that's pretty much true. Yeah, I think from what I understand, the COs don't have a whole lot to do. I mean, they're all managed and self-policed.
Yeah.
So, you know, they tried to make it so we did not self-police unless it was convenient for them to say we should self-police. So, for example, they found Pruno in one of our cells, in some guy's cell. So 2 people out of 40 cells, 2 cells had Pruno. And Pruno is like a jailhouse wine that people make by fermenting fruit with any kind of sugar that they can find or use. So instead of just taking those 2 people that had the Pruno and punishing them, they punished the entire pod. So now everybody in the pod is angry with those 2 people, which incites violence.
Yeah.
So it was just, we got in trouble if we self-policed, but then if we didn't self-police, we also got in trouble. So it was just a no-win situation.
I know that's what mine's going through right now too.
Yeah, you can't, you have to, and I didn't get to this point until a couple of months before I got out, but you have to get to a point to where you just have to roll with it. Otherwise you get driven insane by the nonsensity of it all.
Yeah.
I mean, there was a point where I worked in the kitchen for 7 days earlier in my stay, and somebody was smuggling sriracha back to the cell. So they fired the entire kitchen staff for this 2 people were doing it. Fired the entire staff and then took us out of the re-entry pod where we were out for over 12 hours a day, put us back in a pod where we were only out for 2 hours a day. And I had to spend another 6 weeks there for somebody else's grievances, somebody else doing something wrong. So I had a really hard time with that, but there's nothing you can do. There's absolutely nothing you can do. And getting back to the relationship thing, I think all of that loss of control, when I finally came to grips with that, is when I think our relationship it took a turn for the better. So, you know, it wasn't until I stopped trying to control things and I made one last final effort, and it was a mess. And right after that, I didn't try to control things any longer.
Yeah. And you guys were on opposite coasts, so you didn't get visits, right?
No, we had she was able to come out in August. So I was there from April to March. She came out in August. And we visited for a few days. I had requested for extended visits and was denied. So we got to see each other for a half hour a day through glass. And it was great, but it was also horrible, you know?
Yeah, of course. So not being able to see each other for that long, how did you nurture your relationship? Because it sounds like you guys are just doing amazing since you've been home. But with all that distance between you guys, what did you do to stay so strong?
We wrote a lot. I used Gina as my journal. You know, I would write down everything that was going on and just send it to her. We spoke on the phone every single day, sometimes twice, which got to be expensive, but we figured out ways to reduce the cost by getting a Google number and, you know, just trying to be conscious of the fact that if there's not much to say, then there's not much to say and it's time to hang up. We got to hate the 60-second lady quite a bit. But, you know, it wasn't, the entire time wasn't spent just nurturing our relationship. There was a very difficult period where I screwed up and accused her of something, and it was really bad. And it was really bad for a few weeks after that. And, you know, it was that at that point that, you know, I made the decision that it was, you know, she already made the decision that she was in it for good, and I wasn't going to get rid of her. But if I did something like that again, I knew that it probably was going to cause a major problem, and it wouldn't be good. So I had to, you know, make a decision then and there to never push her away or never make accusations again. If I wanted the relationship to continue to get better. And I think that was a big turning point for us.
Yeah. And you told me yesterday that when you accused her of something that you know that she would never have done. So, and that happens to a lot of our members, the control thing and the accusations. So was it something that you genuinely in the moment because of prison really felt like she did? Or was it something that like a weapon you were using to push her away and you knew she didn't do it?
I knew she didn't do it. It was a weapon.
Okay.
But, I think, as I told you yesterday, I mean, you run out of patience so easily, and not that there's any excuse. I'm not trying to make an excuse. But there are times when you almost like lose your mind because you don't know how to handle everything that's coming at you. I mean, you're being put down by the deputies. You're dealing with, I've got like noise issues. So if people chew really loudly, it just drives me nuts. And there's nothing I can do about it when I'm surrounded by 60 people. So if somebody's chewing really loudly, or, people were playing dominoes and slamming the dominoes on the table, it used to drive me crazy, and it would just get on my last nerve. And then you get this call. And I think it was just that day, that time was just a perfect storm of stuff that if a lot of the ingredients for that recipe would have happened individually, it probably would have been manageable, but because they all happened at kind of the same time, I didn't know how to handle the situation. I did a very poor job. So I spent the next few weeks apologizing. So
I think it's so common and it's so normal. And yeah, it's not an excuse, but you're going through a lot in there. And you had said something earlier about when you're on the call and you just don't have it in you, it's kind of like just, I can't talk, right? And I think that shows a lot of maturity and security within your relationship. So for the people out here that are watching it that aren't that secure in their relationship yet, what advice do you have for her when he is treating her like this?
It's probably best to just stop talking and pick up again tomorrow and see how things are. I don't know. We just kind of rumbled through it. I mean, the next few conversations for us after that were difficult, but we just kind of made it through, and time helped. And, for me, it was just, I said something and then I was instantly like, what the hell am I saying? But I was caught up in the moment and angry and couldn't let go and I couldn't pull back from the moment. So I think if somebody's talking to somebody in that way, the best thing to do is stop the call, allow them some time to think and some time to deal with whatever whatever else they may be trying to deal with there. There was one guy who was having a difficult phone call, and he was finishing up his call, and we got called to lockdown, and he was saying goodbye, and he, instead of allowing him to just hang up, they shut the phones off. So he got really angry at the CO, and he wasn't really angry with the CO. He was angry because his phone conversation was frustrating and he didn't get the chance to finish it the way that he wanted to. So he took it out on the CO, and he got kicked out of the pod. He got sent to another pod. It would have been great if they would have just said, look, I'm sorry, it's time for us to go. So, we're dealing with all this nonsense and petty bullshit, and it's just stupid stuff that, if we talk to somebody and tell them what's going on the outside, they'll be like, oh my God, I can't believe it. They're treating you that way, because it's so minimal. It's so petty. It's so ridiculous, that we're getting locked down for having an extra pair of socks in our cell. It's just insanity. So allow whatever's going on there to run its course, and then pick up the conversation again the next day or the day after that, or whenever, when the person's regained some of their sanity. That's probably the best advice that I would give in that situation.
Thank you so much for that. That's so helpful, because a lot of girls come to me with that question that I just asked you, and I say to them, the same thing you said, give him time, give him space, tell him I'm not going to be spoken to like this, and then give him his time. But a lot of women get really scared that he's not going to call her back and that's it. It's going to be over. And to hear it from your perspective, it validates what I've always said. First of all, where is he going to go? But second of all, just give him that time. Let him cool off. Like you said, you instantly regretted it. I'm sure that happens all the time. So thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
So tell me about when you started to get short on time and your transition back out into society.
Well, I'm still kind of making that transition back out into society. My time started to get short. Everybody said that these are going to be like the longest 2 weeks of your life. And I don't know, I was fairly lucky in that I was working 8 hours a day or 7 hours a day. So that made time go by rather quickly. And I was doing something different. And I wasn't with the rest of the inmate staff. I kind of had my own little section of the kitchen. I reported directly to one of the hired chefs and just kind of did my own thing when I was in the kitchen, which was kind of cool. So I had that going for me. But when I was up in the cell, I noticed that I detached quite a bit to most of the other people. I just got tired of hearing about, court and, warrants in other counties and violations. And I got tired of all of that conversation. So I just kind of pulled back quite a bit and isolated myself to a certain degree. There were 2 or 3 guys that I would talk to. There was one guy that I would eat dinner with, but he was rather quiet as well. So we were like the angry old men table, and we would sit up in our cells and we would kid each other that we were like the 2 old men in the Muppets we'd look down over the pod and just make fun of all the people down there. So that was kind of how I spent the last couple of weeks. I just really pulled back. And I don't know if I was doing that to try to separate myself from some of the people that I had met that I didn't really want to talk to when I got out. I don't know. I'd have to think about that some more. But now that I've been out, it's, I had a great experience with my daughter. She was the first person that came to see me. She actually picked me up. I saw her drive for the first time. She's 16. And she had she and I had a very difficult parting when I went in there. She to this day probably doesn't understand why I made the decisions that I made. And I don't think she ever will. She's very black and white, and there are no shades of gray for her. And I used to see that as a problem, but now I look at it as something that's wonderful for her. I saw it as a problem only because my rationalization for what I'd done fell into the shade of gray category. And she had a really hard time accepting that. So to be able to get out and see her and have a wonderful couple of days with her before coming back to Pennsylvania was great. It was a really nice way to transition from there to from being inside to being outside. The first few hours with her, though, was weird. It was like neither of us knew what to say. It was just very surreal for the first few hours, but wonderful at the same time. And then she got to meet a couple people that had been visiting me on a weekly basis. Our church in Pennsylvania had contacted the church in California and said, is there anybody that could see Don? He doesn't have too many people out there. So 2 people, one of them who started a big rehabilitation center in San Francisco, came to see me every week after week after week after week, which was wonderful. So we actually stayed at one of the women's houses the night that we got out. And then we had dinner at the guy's house the next night. And so my daughter got to meet and thank and understand the bond that I shared with those people, which was really nice too. And now she actually wants to stay in contact with one of them, which was great. But now that I'm back in Pennsylvania, it's been odd in that I still kind of feel like I want to isolate myself. I'm afraid of going out and being seen, and I'm afraid to venture out onto social media. I'm afraid to really have conversations with people that know me prior to knowing that I made this awful decision. And I think that there's a lot of people, unfortunately, that think that you're either good or bad. I think I know that good people are capable of making bad decisions. And I don't know how understanding people are going to be about that. I mean, one side of me says, don't give a crap about what anybody says, but the other side of me does. There's no, I can't hide that. I do care, and it's going to be difficult for me to see people whispering as I walk away. But whatever will be, will be. I mean, the people that love me. They're here. They're with me. They're not going anywhere, and my dogs love me, and that's all that matters. So that's kind of the attitude I'm trying to grasp onto, because to worry so much about everybody else's, what they think of me is just a waste of time.
Yeah. And I can only imagine from my perspective, I feel that on a much smaller scale, because being the outside of the relationship, I have no idea what you went through. But I have a family who owns businesses in the town where I live, and I work the town next door. So I joined a gym in this town, and I go in, and it's a group training gym. And everybody's very friendly, and it's like a close-knit family. And I stay on the outskirts of everybody, and I'm almost very socially awkward. And in there tonight, I was thinking, I was in the locker room, just to use the bathroom really quick and to come out and to do my workout. And in my head, I go, I got to hurry up and get out of this locker room, because I'm the only one in here. And if God forbid anybody knew where my husband was, they would think that I was in here going through their purses or their gym bags, which is so ridiculous to think. But that's where I'm like, I'm going to be judged. I'm not going to share. I'll lose business to my family's restaurant. It's insane. And you're absolutely right. There is no reason that we should care whatsoever about what people think, but we do. So do you think that'll pass with time as it progresses, or?
I don't know. I mean, I think it'll pass with comfort. So I did reach out to one person that was a good friend of mine. And I reached out to him kind of purposely because I knew he would be easy, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
But, there's going to be a lot more difficult people that I'm going to have to deal with. And, I don't really want to sit down and start prioritizing all the people that I want to contact by who's going to be easiest to contact first.
Yeah.
So I just have to be brave enough to get out there and, just start having those conversations. And I'm sure that I'll be surprised positively by some of them and negatively by others. But it's going to be interesting. I think I don't think I've changed I don't think I've changed who I am very much, as far as my beliefs go. And I think that there are a lot of people that will look at me and be like, how can you have said all those things on Facebook or posted all those things that were wonderful and special, and then, here you go, you went and did this crime. The thing is, I think, we're all, just one bad decision away from going through what I went through, or going through what your husband went through, or, we're this close, all of us. And, it was a little difficult for me to be judged by a bunch of people who, I know that attorneys go into their trust accounts and pull money out and then pay it back. I mean, so it was difficult to be judged by people who made some of the same bad decisions, but they just didn't get caught. And granted, it wasn't to the same extent. So for people to sit there and judge you, it makes it like you get angry to a certain degree. But I understand it. I'm surprised by some people. I also feel like I'm defensive. So somebody could say something to me that they're not meaning to say in a negative way, but I'll take it in a negative way because I'm looking at it from that aspect, and I'm trying to find fault because I'm just on the lookout. You know what I mean? So I don't know. I'm hoping that feeling goes away with time. I think it'll actually go away more with interaction and how the interactions go. If they go negatively, it might get worse. If they go positively, it might get better. At least that's what my thought is right now. We'll see.
Yeah, that makes complete sense.
Yeah, I did send, I've got a stepson and he has a couple playmates on the block. I sent the parents of those playmates a little note and just said, hey, you guys know what happened. You saw the police cars here, etc. If you want me to come by and talk to you and talk to the kids and answer any questions, I'm more than happy to do that. So I just thought rather than have them, whisper to themselves as they walk by or, prevent our kids from playing with ours, I thought I'd throw that out there and just kind of nip it in the bud.
Yeah, I love that because you might as well address that elephant that's going to be in the room, especially when you have a child involved. Did you get any responses back?
Yes, one was excellent, way better than I was anticipating. The other one, I saw her passing on the street and she said she wanted to talk to her ex-husband, that she'd get back to me.
Okay.
So, yeah. So, again, however it will be. So we'll see how it turns out. Stay tuned.
Yeah, of course. And the positive reinforcements, it's like you were saying before, will help you feel more and more comfortable. So a lot of people say that jail or prison saved their life, or they're not the person that they were before, and so they don't regret the time that they were in, and they came out with these lessons and a different person. Did you feel like you had that experience? And if you did, what would you say that was?
Yeah. I feel like from a principle standpoint, I'm still similar to the person I was going in. I still have the same beliefs, the same spiritual outlook, the same love for my family. I think what's different, though, is I went in thinking that I had to do things to impress people in order to be liked. So my goal was to be liked. And I did everything I could except be myself in order to do that. So this experience allowed me to strip everything that I had. I mean, I had to, and just be me. And people seem to like that person anyway. So I think that's what I've come out with, is just an ability to not hide behind some charade and just be myself. So I guess that's a pretty big life lesson.
Yeah, I think that's huge. That's amazing.
Yeah.
And you don't have to go to jail. Like, I think everybody who's watching this that's never been there can take a page out of that book. It's a huge life lesson for everybody. Okay, silly question.
I don't know if I would have actually gotten it, though, had I not gone to jail.
Really?
Because I had to be stripped down to nothing in order to get there. And I definitely was. So, everybody's got their rock bottom, I guess. That was mine.
Yeah, good point. Wow. I didn't think about it like that. Okay, so silly question, but everybody always wants to know, what was your first meal when you came home?
Well, mine's boring because we're vegan. So I had we had tofu scramble at our friend's house, and it was delicious. And we had fresh fruit and a bottle of water. So the water tasted like the best water I've ever had in my entire life. And we had strawberries, and it was wonderful. Yeah, it was delicious.
Personally, I don't think that's boring. That's my kind of first meal too. But yeah, so I don't want to take up too much of your time. What else do you want us to know? What did I not ask? What message do you want to pass along to everybody?
I don't know. I would just say, be tenacious, be patient. Don't stop loving your loved ones, because even if they're having difficulty and trying to push you away, they really don't mean it. They're just trying to grasp onto something out there that they can still call theirs and control in some way possible, because it's not fun in there. It's just not fun. And you're being pushed every single day to the limit. So like I told you yesterday, it's like having to go to the bathroom really, really bad, knowing that you're 5 minutes away from the restroom, and then you get there and the door's closed and you can't get in. It's just like, there's that feeling. It's that feeling every single day. And you just have to be aware. And odds are that they're not sharing that you have no idea how awful it is. Because, there's no way to describe how dehumanizing the whole process is, and you treat it worse than an animal. So you're trying to deal with all of that, and then trying to put on as happy a face as you can during a conversation with your loved ones at night, and sometimes it just doesn't happen. So it's not easy to have some of those conversations where you're being told that you're not wanted, or you're not going to get called again. But obviously that's not the case. They're going to call again. They still love you. It's just that they're having a really, really shitty day, because there's lots of them in there. There's lots of crappy days.
Yeah, I think that's such great advice. And I thought of one more question after I said we're not going to ask anymore, but it was what I was asking you yesterday when we got cut off. And I think I said something like, I want to be very gentle about how I ask this. And I kind of said that wrong. What I meant to say was, I mean this in a very PG way. So I'm just disclaimer, right? So what was it like to sleep next to somebody for the first time again? Because I've heard so many different things. How was that transition, I guess, back to sleeping next to somebody?
It didn't feel like a transition. It felt like it was the night, like we had just slept together the night before.
So no issues or?
No.
Okay.
It wasn't an issue. Was it an issue? It wasn't an issue for me. I thought it was great. It was nice to have somebody right there again. Now, we had a 10-year-old at the foot of our bed, who was super excited to see, his Dawn again. So, but it was great. I didn't make it an issue in my head, believe it or not. And so I think that had a lot to do with it being a non-issue.
Yeah. I was just asking because we hear a lot about the PTSD and the isolation. So I was more curious about that for myself than anything, but I love that.
Now, I guess I'm having some bad dreams.
Okay.
So, I think that might be difficult to put up with for the other person in the bed. But other than that, I think it's been great.
Awesome. Oh, I'm so excited. Welcome home again. I would love to do this again, maybe in a couple months, just to check in, see how things are going, see if there's been any kind of struggles or issues, or if you've been able to put anything behind you, or anything you'd like to share.
Sure, whenever.
Okay, awesome. On behalf of everybody, we're so excited. I literally sat at my desk. I'm such a cheese ball, but I sat at the desk, my desk the day Gina posted that she was waiting to pick you up, and I was crying. Tears, literal tears. So I'm so happy for both of you. Thank you so much again. You guys have a great night, and I can't wait to do this again soon.
All right. Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye.